Before I tell you about the man who changed Judaism forever, you need to know something. Between 100 BC and 70 AD, at least 6 men claimed to be the Messiah. Every single one of them led uprisings against Rome, and every single one of them was crushed. But 100 years after Jesus, one man rose up, and at this time, one of Judaism's most respected rabbis declared him the Messiah. His name was Bar Kokhba, son of the star. What happened next didn't just fail, it forced Jewish leadership to completely reshape what they believed of the Messiah. Here's the story.
Welcome to Between the Lines, where we dive deeper into Scripture and uncover what's hidden between the lines. I'm Chris Adams, thank you for joining me, and let's get into the message.
Nearly every man who claimed to be the Messiah before Jesus, or was seen that way, did so in a military sense. Man, you can understand why. They were living under the constant pressure of foreign occupation. They were oppressed, they were desperate for deliverance. And they believed that deliverance would come through force, not forgiveness. So when Jesus came, calm, peaceful, talking about loving your enemies, he didn't look like a deliverer. And for many, he didn't even look like a contender. But the problem wasn't that he failed to match prophecy. The problem was that people weren't looking at the prophecies, the scriptures. They were looking at their own opinions. We still do the same thing today in several areas of life. They were expecting a warrior. What they got was a servant. And for many, that was simply unacceptable. But Jesus wasn't the last man to be heralded as the Messiah. About 100 years later, another figure would rise up. And this time, he wouldn't just challenge Rome. He would force Jewish leadership to redefine what they believed the Messiah should be, and what they could never again allow him to be. His name was Simon Bar Kokhba. Born Simon ben Kokhba, he was later given the title Bar Kokhba, son of the star. That title came from Messianic prophecy found in Numbers 24:17. A star shall come out of Jacob. And his followers believed he was that star. And more than that, they believed he was the one they had been waiting for. He rose to prominence about 132 AD, and this just wasn't a rebellion. It was a full-blown Messianic movement. One of the most respected rabbis in Jewish history, Rabbi Akiva, publicly declared him the Messiah, a claim referenced in the Jewish Talmud. And he wasn't alone. Many top rabbinic leaders supported Bar Kokhba, convinced he was the one who would finally drive out the Romans. Akiva even said, "This is the King Messiah." And for a brief moment, it looked like they were right. Bar Kokhba led what's now known as the Bar Kokhba Revolt, or the Second Jewish Revolt. He established an independent Jewish state that lasted for about 2.5 years. He minted coins, he organized an army, he held territory, and he inspired thousands. But the world around him was still on fire. Emperor Hadrian had banned circumcision, which the Jewish people saw as a direct assault on their covenant. He also announced plans to build a pagan temple to Jupiter on the ruins of the Second Temple. It was more than political. It was personal. The message from Rome was brutal. Your God is dead. Your covenant is over. And with that, war exploded. Hadrian sent in one of his top generals, Sextus Julius Severus, and the Roman response was devastating. According to the historian Dio Cassius, over 580,000 Jews were killed, with many more dying from starvation and disease. Towns were flattened. Villages were erased. The land was burned. Jerusalem was renamed Aelia Capitolina, and the Jewish people were banned from entering, except once a year to mourn the temple's destruction. But Hadrian didn't stop there. He issued a final insult. The province of Judea was renamed Syria Palestina, a deliberate throwback to Israel's ancient enemy, the Philistines. It was an eraser, a message. You don't belong here anymore. This land is no longer yours. And it came directly from Hadrian himself. As for Bar Kokhba, he was killed in 135 AD at the fortress at Batar, the final stronghold of the revolt. And yes, Hadrian did go on to build that temple to Jupiter on the Temple Mount. It stood for nearly 200 years, but more on that later. The fallout from the Bar Kokhba Revolt changed everything. After the rebellion collapsed, Rome cracked down hard on the region and on Judaism as a whole. Countless people were killed, some in ways so brutal they were meant to send a message. And the message was clear: don't try this again. But it wasn't just Rome that changed. The Jewish leadership did too. And for them, this was the breaking point. They realized that every time a messianic hope was stirred up, every time someone claimed to be the Messiah, it didn't lead to deliverance. It led to destruction. And that's when something shifted. Not in the scriptures, but in how the scriptures were handled. See, their idea of the Messiah wasn't shaped by deep study. It was shaped by desperation. They weren't asking, what do the scriptures say? They were asking, what do we need right now? They looked at their suffering. They looked at Rome. And they expected a military leader. But the scriptures had already described the Messiah: a servant, a man of sorrows, one who would be pierced, one who would carry the sins of many. But instead of seeing that, they looked for someone to fight Caesar. And honestly, we still do this today. Not with the Messiah, but in other ways. We often interpret scripture through the lens of our situation, not the other way around. The Jewish leadership, they couldn't see the bigger picture. That God wasn't trying to overthrow Rome. He was trying to overthrow sin. But every messianic claimant they followed tried to deal with the political problem, which only led to another political revolt, and then another massacre. So the rabbis made a decision. They started discouraging any public expression of messianic hope. They began reinterpreting what the Messiah would be, pushing his arrival into the far future, spiritualizing the prophecies, and making everything more vague. And most of all, they shut down any talk of revolt. Judaism, which had once been evangelical and expansive, became focused on one thing: survival. And that survival instinct shaped everything they taught, especially when it came to the Messiah. After Bar Kokhba's death, Jewish leaders made a decision: no more messianic movements, nor more revolts, and most importantly, no more talk about Jesus. Because there was still a Jesus problem. His followers weren't going away, and they were using the Hebrew scriptures to prove he was the Messiah. That's what I covered in the full video, how Jewish leadership responded by reinterpreting the very prophecies that pointed to him. The link is in the description, or check it out on the screen right now. Thank you for joining me. Stay blessed, and I will see you next time.